Thanks for joining us here on 9 News Plus. I'm meteorologist Chris Bianchi. So we're going to take a look back at the month of November, which was actually one of our coldest Novembers in recent memory. In fact, going back to 2000, this was our coldest November in the last 22 years. So pretty impressive stuff, but I'm going to kind of break that down in terms of some context, also some snow stats, and also, by the way, today, December the 1st, marks the start of meteorological winter. I'll explain what that means and also how that factors in terms of how the overall fall shaped on out, which generally speaking, we were on the warmer and drier side of things. But November, as I mentioned, our coldest November since the year 2000, which is fairly impressive, going back 22 years. We did have an average monthly temperature of 35.6 degrees. It was actually pretty helped out by yesterday in particular. We only had a high temperature of 29 in Denver and a low temperature of 4 degrees for us in town. Again, that made it our coldest November since 2000. But this is important context as well. This only tied for our 19th coldest November on record. And we had a very kind of cold pattern. We had a trough in place throughout much of the month. And what that means is that tends to lead to a very prolonged cold stretch for us here in Denver. But it only ending up as our 19th coldest month on record. Again, that's also, in a sense, a sign of a warming climate, is the fact that it should have probably ended up being colder than that if you consider the pattern that we were in. Now, snowfall. We ended up with about 11 inches worth of snow so far this, or throughout the month of November. That was about 3.5 inches above the long-term average of 7.4 inches worth of snowfall for us here in Denver. Also, a little bit of important context. Last 25 years, we've noted a big decline in Denver November snowfall. That may be related to a warming climate, may not be, but certainly in the last 25 years, we've only averaged about 6 inches of snow in the month of November. That's a pretty big drop off from the long-term average of about 7.5, 8 inches worth of snow. Long story short, with that, this was our snowiest November in one of our snowiest Novembers in recent memory. It was our third snowiest November in the last 15 years. Again, the last 25 years, we've only averaged about 6 inches worth of snowfall in the month of November. So this month in particular was a nice little boom of snowfall for us here in the Denver area. Certainly happy to see that. And of course, that's also going to really help out with our fire danger over the next few days. We've got some pretty strong winds tomorrow. That would normally be a high fire danger day, but because of the recent snowpack, we are going to be talking about those temperatures, or I should say those the overall fire danger being lower than what it would otherwise be if we didn't have that. So, average fall temperature, this is going back to September the 1st to November the 30th. Meteorologists, we describe seasons based on full calendar months. Reason being, it's even record keeping, because astronomical seasons change in terms of the exact day. Sometimes it's, for example, the winter solstice this year is December the 21st. Last year is December the 22nd. Some years it's December the 20th. Other years, I think sometimes it can happen as late as December the 23rd as well. But because that date changes for exact and even record keeping, we just do it based on full months. So our average fall temperature going back from September the 1st through November the 30th, 52.8. That is about a degree above the long-term average. We were very, very warm in both September and October, but our, as I mentioned, cold November, that did bring down that average temperature for the fall, but we were still above average. And we were also drier than average here in Denver as well. We had about a ½ inch less fall precipitation for us from September the 1st through November the 30th. We had about 2.18 inches worth of rain and melted snow equivalent, and the long-term average over those 91 days is about 2.76 inches. So we finished with about 75–80% of what we would typically get in terms of that precip. Not terrible, but certainly last fall, you might remember, of course, was extremely, extremely dry. We only had 1.2 inches of total precipitation for the final 6 months of last year, and those were some of the awful conditions that led up to the Marshall Fire on December the 30th. We didn't finish. This was a more normal deficit. This was within the middle 50, even I would say middle 20% of what you would expect in terms of that precipitation for us here. So this is generally speaking, okay news, not amazing. Same for us in terms of the snowpack. We had a pretty good October in terms of snowpack, especially in southern Colorado. We kind of lagged in southern Colorado during the month of November, so that has brought the statewide snowpack average down about 92% of what you would expect it to be as we start meteorological winter, as we start December. We're at about 92% of where we should be, with central and northern Colorado in generally pretty good shape. We're around where we should be, what you would expect in the Gunnison, Colorado, South Platte, North Platte, and Yampa River valleys. It's southern Colorado where we're lagging a bit. We could use a storm in southern Colorado. Our next storm system for tomorrow and Saturday looks to favor northern Colorado once again, so I wouldn't be surprised if we climb above 100% in a lot of those river basins after that storm system in northern Colorado. But there are some signs that next week we could see a bit more of an active pattern that does bring us maybe closes the gap in some of those southern mountains a bit. But this is actually a fairly typical La Nina pattern. When we're in a La Nina like what we're in right now, it tends to favor northern Colorado with more snow. In southern Colorado, we tend to get lighter snowfall amounts, but we're starting to see maybe some early hints that that dynamic may play out this winter. But looking back in terms of what we saw here during the month of November, again, it was our coldest November in 22 years. Pretty impressive stuff, just because we had this general trophy pattern. We had a lot of low pressure. We had fairly frequent snow systems drop their way through Colorado and specifically the Denver area. That kept our temperature on average down a little bit, and that also kept our, when we get snow and we get colder temperatures, it's also worth noting that colder air can hold less moisture than warmer air can. So as a result of that, often when it's colder, we tend to end up drier than average, and we ended up actually a little drier than average in the month of November and also throughout the fall as well. So our fall, we actually finished slightly warmer and slightly drier than average, and the month of November certainly much colder than average. We were about 4 degrees below the monthly norm, and also snowfall-wise, we ended up finishing above average for the first time in 3 years. It was our snowiest November since 2019 and our third snowiest November in the last 15 years here in Denver. So overall, that is certainly pretty good news, and that helps with our fire danger over the next few days. So hopefully that answers some of your questions about what we saw here in the month of November and also what we saw during meteorological fall.